Good day, you're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Danie, Laurel.
And I'm Jess Delos Santos. Here are today's top stories. No reprieve in sight for the peso as the local currency drops to a fresh all-time low. $1 is now worth 57 pesos.
Is the worst over for inflation? The PSA says the answer is not yet clear at this point, but Finance Chief Diokno believes soaring prices may already peak this quarter.
Indonesia to the rescue. President Bongbong Marcos asked Jakarta's help to improve our country's fisheries sector, saying he could not accept the fact the country has to import what was once known as the poor man's fish.
Patulong ako sa fisheries kasi obsessed ako dito sa Pilipinas nag-import ng galunggong. Hindi ko talaga matanggap yan eh.
And pressure is mounting for major mobile operators to combat worsening text scams. We begin our broadcast with the peso falling to a fresh record low. The local currency dropped to a new all-time low for the third straight trading day to 57 pesos against the greenback on Tuesday, that is September 6th. That's lower than the 56.999 posted on Monday, September 5th. Now, how does this affect Filipino consumers? Well, economists believe it's not far-fetched for prices of commodities to rise on the back of the weaker peso as it has become more expensive to import products.
The ordinary people will definitely feel the pain of depreciating peso. Why? Because we are almost importing everything, consumer goods, onions, garlic, fish. We import petroleum. So consumers will definitely feel that.
Yung pagbili natin ng oil, mas nagmamahal. Pag-transport ng goods, mas mahal. Diba? Yun yung pasok nun. Yung mga ibang inputs sa pag-produce ng mga domestic goods na kailangan ng imported inputs, mamahal din.
Soraya de Guzman, the chief statistical specialist of the Philippine Statistics Authority, says the weakening peso will impact inflation, particularly the prices of fuel, but she notes that the effects will likely be felt after 2 months.
Sa experience namin, ma'am, sirs, pag po tumataas yung presyo ng langis, usually hindi naman po agad-agad nare-reflect yung impact sa presyo kaagad po ng mga commodities. Usually, or sa pamasahe po, meron pa pong gap na
may lag time.
2 months. So may lag time po na 2 months.
Speaking of inflation, the Philippine Statistics Authority says it remains unsure if soaring prices have already peaked. For his part, Finance Secretary Diokno believes inflation will remain elevated for the remainder of the year, with peak seen during the third quarter. Shaila Francisco with the story.
Inflation slowed down in August for the first time in 6 months. The Philippine Statistics Authority said it settled at 6.3%, slightly down from 6.4% in July. This is due to lower gasoline and diesel prices and slower price hike in meat, fish, and vegetables. Despite this, consumers in Metro Manila still find commodity prices too expensive. The region's inflation accelerated to 5.7% amid price hikes in restaurant, house rentals, and education services. The PSA admits that it's still not clear whether inflation has already peaked.
Kung tataas naman yung transport ulit, so posibleng mag-shift yung ating direction. This September, for example, there are news about raising jeepney fare, so that would also contribute to this month's inflation.
The pressure is now on the central bank to impose measures to control inflation. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas said it is prepared to take further policy action to bring inflation back to government target. The BSP has been on a rate hike spree in a bid to ease inflation. The NEDA meanwhile assured continuous provision of subsidies to ease inflationary pressures. Shaila Francisco, We Are One News.
Even in the peso's weakness, some benefit more than others. But how much of a boon is that still for the export sector? Let's ask Dan Lachica, president of the Semiconductor and Electronics sector in the Philippines, or SAEP. Dan, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Jess. Good morning to your viewers.
All right, normally we would think, of course, that exporters are set to gain from the weakness of the peso. How true is that still? How much of a windfall are you getting from the peso's depreciation? Is it still the same as previous years?
Well, unfortunately, the declining peso is good for the industry, while it may not be good for our consumers, no? Because for every peso decline, that means, the stronger dollars. We actually see we used to see, I should say, about 1.5% to 2% increase in sales. Now, at the rate that we're seeing today, this may jump up to about 4 to 5%. So it's beneficial for the exporters, but then again, it's not so good for our local consumers.
Okay, now sir, you also, however, need to import the inputs here. How have the prices of that changed due to the foreign exchange rates, but at the same time, commodity prices looking to go down already to pre-war levels?
Well, those numbers that I quoted, the 4 to 5%, already factors in the fact that we
it's net
import materials. Yes.
Okay, so the benefit is still net. Sir, do you see this benefit continuing, or is this going to be a short-term benefit, of course, because of the weakening peso, or is this something that you are looking to be sustainable for the industry?
Well, there's a lot of global perturbations, as you can see. The supply chain disruption, the Ukraine-Russia war, and the volatility of the gasoline prices, gas prices. So, and of course, you just mentioned the inflation in the Philippines as well. So there's a lot of factors that weigh into it. But as long as the peso continues to decline, it really is favorable for the exporters.
How are those offshore headwinds at least cutting down on your margins? The last time we talked, you did mention that somehow you're still trying to absorb the cost there to protect your consumers. How much of that scenario still remains?
That's an interesting question, because for the materials that the exporters use, power, for instance, right? Gasoline prices also. I mean, power is about 12% of the operating cost of the exporters. Some of them are fixed price contracts. Well, most of them are fixed price contracts, I should say. But then again, there have been instances where, because of the increase in price in coal and fuel, then the fixed price contract was also changed. So they're paying for the higher price. But the philosophy of the exporters is that we don't pass on their costs to the customers, because that's suicide. The customers, the global customers, have a lot of options, and so by doing that, they just have to have predictable prices. So the margins are compressed a bit. So it's painful, but business continues.
Sir, without the currency or foreign exchange benefit, how has the demand for the sector been going, especially since, of course, China, there is weakening economy, and we did see the trade figures, the exporting there, quite impacted. But are you seeing that the reopening of the economy in the other countries are increasing demand?
Well, the electronics industry plays in the global market, so notwithstanding the local circumstances, except for, of course, for the year of the pandemic in 2020, we saw a contraction of the demand. But 2021 saw a resurgence and recovery. In fact, the 2021 number of $45.6 billion of exports was actually higher than the pre-pandemic numbers. And so we see we projected a 10% growth for this year, and As of June year to date, we were seeing about $22.6 billion, and at this rate, if you just double it, we will exceed the 2021 numbers even.
Okay, wow, at least, and considering, of course, that you had an all-time high in 2021. Now, more on that point that you mentioned earlier, how do you think has the weakness of the peso at least improved the competitiveness of our products here, at least in the international market in terms of price points?
Well, since we haven't been changing, our prices, so that hasn't really affected the competitiveness. But what's hurting our companies here would be the increased costs, so squeezing of the margins related to the high power cost, high logistics cost, even high labor cost, if you consider the holidays. In fact, one of the things that we'd like to do from an industry perspective is to seek audience with the cabinet and hopefully explain to them that we need to revisit the incentives rationalization provisions of CREATE.
Sir, more to that point, have you felt a real effect on that? Because this is something that we've been discussing even pre-pandemic, diba? That you had an estimate of how many companies might close shop and move to other countries in Southeast Asia. Has that happened, or have you been able to, work out incentives, deals, or rationalization with the government to allow these companies to stay?
Well, pre-CREATE, there already were about 3 companies that were spooked and decided to scale down, if not shut down completely. Now, the way CREATE structured the incentives rationalization, by the way, don't get me wrong, CREATE was good in terms of reducing the corporate income tax, right? But it's really very hurtful for the industry for the incentive rationalization. What will happen is during this transition period of 9 years, we probably won't see a lot of exodus. What we have seen, though, is some reduction of investments in the Philippines, investments that should have come to the Philippines. But were actually funneled to sites outside the Philippines of the multinationals to the tune of about $3.2 billion, right? And of course, I can't mention the names of this multinational. So this 3.2 billion would have been invested in the Philippines, but because of the incentives rationalization, there were some hesitancy to do that. Because what happens if you don't have our industry depends on new products, new technologies, right? And because of the nature of our operating costs in the Philippines, and you combine that with the incentives, it was the decision of the CEOs to move it to their sites outside the Philippines. But because we're stuck with this legacy, don't get me wrong, there are still some investments, nominal investments that are coming in. But what we really want to get are these new products, which would be carrying out, sustaining the activities in the Philippine sites. And without this, after the 9-year transition period, guess what's going to happen if these products become obsolete? You're going to see a different complexion, a different landscape. This $46 billion export industry will not be the same.
All right. Well, again, all up to discussion and review, and hopefully you do get that audience to revisit the rationalization of the incentives for the sector. Thank you so much, Dan Lachica, President of the Semiconductor Electronics Industries in the Philippines, or SAPI. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Danie. Thank you, Jen.
Let's pause for a quick break. Coming right up. Telcos are seeking shared efforts from stakeholders to combat worsening tech scams.
More of that and other stories when Business World Live returns. Stay with us.
You're still watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danie, Laurel. With a hectic schedule for the second day of his state visit in Singapore, President Bongbong Marcos is expected to meet with the Singaporean President and the Prime Minister.
But before that, let's take a recap as to what went down on his first day in the city-state. Marlene Alcaide with the report.
Just like what he did in Indonesia, President Bongbong Marcos kicked off his state visit in Singapore by meeting the Filipino community in the city-state. A crowd of 1,500 Filipinos cheered the president as he arrived at the venue. The OFWs even greeted him a happy birthday in advance, with the chief executive's birthday coming up on September 13.
Talaga naman at napakasaya talaga pagka nagkatagpo-tagpo ang mga Pinoy. Pagka may pagkakataon na makasama at makapiling ang ating mga kababayan, siyempre kami pupunta, talagang masaya, naiba, at pati na yung mga tiga rito nagugulat sa atin dahil ang gugulo natin.
President Marcos thanked the 200,000 Filipinos in Singapore, where he won a landslide victory during the last elections. Singapore got the second highest voter turnout for the overseas automated voting in the Asia-Pacific region. Marcos Jr. promised that the government will work hard to improve the country.
Pati kami ay nagulat habang nagbibilang ng boto na umabot ng labis ng 31 million votes ang ibigay ng kaya naman, malalim po ang utang na loob namin sa inyo. Kaya ang aming kapalit ay ang trabaho at pagpaganda sa Pilipinas.
He also vowed to help the families of Filipinos abroad left in the Philippines through housing programs, scholarships, and healthcare benefits. Migrant Worker Secretary Susan Toots Ople meanwhile announced that Singaporean government has reached out to employ more Filipino health workers in Singapore. A joint communique would be signed today with Singapore's Ministry of Health.
Sobrang napaglit po sila na ating mga manggagawa noong panahon ng pandemya.
The president's schedule here in Singapore will be jam-packed with meetings today, September 7th. Earlier today, the president graced a program for the naming of a new variety of orchid. President Marcos is also set to meet with Singaporean President Halima Yacob and Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong to discuss key regional and global issues. The leaders are expected to witness the signing of several agreements, including deals on ensuring data protection and privacy and counter-terrorism efforts. He will also attend an economic briefing and roundtable meeting with the business community in Singapore, where he hopes to secure more job-generating investment deals in the country. For News 5, Marlene Alcaide, we are One News.
President Bongbong Marcos says he sought the help of Indonesia in supporting the Philippines' agricultural sector. According to the president, he discussed with Indonesian President Joko Widodo the possibility of importing urea fertilizers. This as prices of fertilizers remain high amid the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia. President Marcos also says he appealed to Indonesian investors for support in developing the Philippines' fish industry. This, as he said, he could not accept that our country needs to import galunggong, which was once known as the poor man's fish.
Patulong ako sa fisheries kasi obsessed ako dito sa Pilipinas nag-import ng galunggong. Hindi ko talaga matanggap yan.
President Marcos also says he and President Widodo discussed the possibility of increasing energy trade volume between the two countries. Amid his push for renewable energy, the president says the Philippines is poised to receive more coal supply from Indonesia.
There was a time a few weeks back where they stopped export of coal. Nakiusap tayo sa kanila at sinama naman tayo dun sa listahan na bibigyan nila.
The country's major mobile operators are now dealing with greater pressure to address worsening tech scams. Former Privacy Commissioner Raymond Liboro tells One News's Agenda that the privacy panic should prompt regulators to look into the operations of mobile operators. He also described the proliferation of personalized spam messages as very alarming. But for Globe, telco companies are also victims of cyber criminal activities. The firm says the fight against cybercrime is shared among the public, the government, and industry players. Globe said it has already blocked about 784 million spam and scam messages from January to July this year. PLDT and Smart, meanwhile, said that criminals might have used, quote, a popular e-wallet and an online messaging platform to harvest the names of subscribers, citing an investigation by the NBI and the PNP. But they clarified that the infrastructure of GCash or any digital wallet has not been compromised. Smart says it continues to work with authorities to track down cyber criminals.
A Bangko Sentral survey showed that Philippine banks are expecting a double-digit growth in lending in the next 2 years. According to the Banking Sector Outlook Survey, 70.7% of top bank executives are bullish on their operations. This is higher than the 60.5% recorded in the first semester of 2021. The banking industry's optimism comes as top executives see the country's continuous recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, excluding the impact of the Russia war conflict as well as inflation, banks expect the Philippine GDP to grow above 6%.
Now, going back to those spam and scam messages, I mean, yesterday, not even half of the day yet, and I've already received, I think, three or four messages.
Getting a little bit concerning now, Jess.
And those are the biggest stories on the economic and corporate front today. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danie Laurel. We are One News, all sides, all the time. Don't go away. We'll give you the latest on the local bourse when Businessworld Live returns. Stay with us.
And you're still watching Businessworld Live here in One News now. Dan, it's been 70 days since BBM has taken the helm. Give us a look back on how stocks have performed since.
70 days na, Jess. Can you even
Bilis.
believe? Parang it's just been election season. But nevertheless, as to your question, take a look at this chart from Bloomberg. It's very interesting, actually. The others have been 100 days in office. BBM 70 days. And so far, stocks have been up 6.5% since he took the helm. You can compare that to, the era of Benigno Aquino III at 25.9% up. And our worst performer here, Joseph Estrada, where our stocks were down by more than 30% in the first 100 days. Now, what is leading to this? This, according to Francis Diaz at Luna Securities, it's due to the fact, of course, there is the opening of the economy, so you can't discount that fact, but also because of the selection of BBM of a well-respected economics team. And that has shown that it's an encouraging sign of return to normalcy in the country that is moving forward. So, good sign for those who had invested, let's say, prior to this, but, not so fast just because traders are fleeing emerging markets in general because of this spookiness of the strong dollar. Take a look at that, where the MSCI Emerging Markets Fund has been down quite a bit, and still on the back of the dollar here, Jess. I did want to point out quite a painful sight for our peso, 57.2555 already, closing in on 60 pesos to the greenback, Jess.
Okay, this time earlier, we were talking about spam and scam messages. I'm sure I'm not the only one receiving messages with my name on it. What are the telcos saying?
Well, so far, I haven't received anything with my name, and I hope it stays that way. But as we had reported here, the telco players are saying, this is a joint issue of cybersecurity. But what the initial findings have shown is that criminals may have bought the data from different establishments. Now, let's take a quick peek at how our telcos are doing amid these scams. You can see PLDT down by 2% or 2.2% just today's trade. Globe as well down by 0.6%. Dito and Converge as well down. So it is, of course, down for the telco space. But before we end the broadcast, just a quick peek on our bourse as we end or as we begin Wednesday's trade down to 66.40 spot 18. So still on that downward path in the past 2 days, Jess.
Okay, the hope of course is that we really get to the bottom of all these scam and spam messages quickly, as soon as possible. And that's it for today, September 7, 2022. Join us again tomorrow at exactly 9:30 a.m. You can also catch us on Signal Play. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News Live anytime, anywhere. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danie Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. We are One News, all sides, all the time.